Hi guys, I'm back. Okay, gonna give you an update on Epstein, but I am going to talk first about President Trump's Labor Secretary, Alex Acosta, who is aligned with Jeff Epstein and helped him get off easily, reportedly. There's been a lot of confusion with that and why President Trump would appoint someone aligned with Jeffrey Epstein. And whenever President Trump does something that you can't understand or I can't understand, I always try to give it a few days, because his actions don't always make sense at first, but if you give it a few days and look into it and do some research, it always makes sense in the end. This man's brilliance, the plan has been in place for 20 years. President Trump is so many steps ahead of these people, the cabal. It's incredible. Everything he does is very strategic. Every move he makes, every appointment he makes, every tweet he makes, every misspelling in his tweets, that man is brilliance, and everything he does is strategic. And whenever there's something he does that I can't understand, I just try to give it a few days, and it always makes sense. And I always sit back and I go, wow, that man's brilliant. So with Alex, he has resigned now, and a lot of people have been pointing this out. The mainstream media never would have covered Jeffrey Epstein's arrest if they couldn't align him with President Trump. And having Alex Acosta, who has been aligned with Jeffrey Epstein, and it looks like covered up for Jeffrey Epstein, that enabled the mainstream media to attack Trump due to Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. And that forced the mainstream media to cover Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. And anyone that doubts that they would have covered this regardless, really, they didn't cover NXIVM. They barely covered Backpage. No one, and the outlets that did cover NXIVM, you guys, they didn't tell the truth about it. They didn't talk about the horrific mind control experiments they were doing on their sex slaves. They didn't talk about the fact they were molesting children. They didn't cover the fact that they were raping kids and trafficking kids and bringing them through Mexico using fake IDs. They didn't talk about any of that stuff. I never once saw NXIVM be covered in the mainstream media on the cable news. Now, they did cover it in print a little bit, but barely. So now we know why President Trump appointed Alex Acosta. It was brilliant. And because he did that, the mainstream media jumped on Jeffrey Epstein's arrest and used Alex to an attempt to bring down President Trump. And then, of course, we know they tried to align President Trump with Jeffrey Epstein. And it only took a few days before the truth to get out. And the truth is that President Trump is not friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And not only was he not friends with Jeffrey Epstein, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, among other things. And President Trump went on the record the other day from the White House, and he said that Jeffrey Epstein is not someone that he respected, and he encouraged people to find out who went to the island. And I know that all the Anons have been digging on this, and I started going through the flight logs of the Lolita Express and who went to the island, who didn't go to the island years ago. So now we know why President Trump appointed Alex Acosta. It was a brilliant move. That man is so smart. High IQ, President Trump. He put one over their heads again, and it was brilliant. So the mainstream media was forced to cover Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. And like I said, if you think they would have covered it in the way that they did if they couldn't align Epstein with Trump, then you're fooling yourself. Because all you have to do is look at the coverage of NXIVM. And NXIVM has no ties to President Trump, so they didn't cover it. They have ties to the Clintons and so many elites, like Richard Branson and even the Dalai Lama. But the mainstream media, especially the cable news, they barely touched it. I never saw anyone in cable news talk about NXIVM. I saw E! talk a little bit about NXIVM, but E! also didn't tell the truth about NXIVM. So President Trump Winning, man, that guy is so smart. All right. So there's a lot coming out on Jeffrey Epstein, and I just want to go through some bullet points here on Epstein and what's being uncovered. And a lot of these things I've known for a while, but I know a lot of you guys don't know, and a lot of the stuff is not going mainstream. So one thing that a lot of people are talking about, and even people in the mainstream media, which is pretty amazing to see, is everyone's questioning where Jeffrey Epstein got his money. So he's this billionaire, but no one knows how he made his money. It's all really shady. Well, there's been rumors for a very long time that Jeffrey Epstein was funded either by the CIA or Mossad, or maybe both. And there actually is a report that Alex Acosta claimed that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. All right, so let me just tell you something. QAnon and the takedown of the cabal, especially these elite pedophile rings, Q and the takedown of these elite pedophile rings, Q is the biggest threat to world governments and to the big spy agencies around the world, including our own. And I'm not talking about the white hats, I'm talking about the bad guys. I'm talking about the bad guys in the CIA and the bad guys in our government, which I believe is almost completely cleaned out now. Almost completely cleaned out, including the CIA, which is why we saw the CIA director wearing a blouse with white hats on it at the State of the Union this year, Gina Haspel, which was really cool. But, you know, in my personal life, I have been targeted big time by CIA and or Mossad agents. Big time. By many agents, a lot of really bad people. I believe most of these people that have targeted me are funded by Mossad and work for Mossad. And Q and exposing these child sex trafficking rings are a huge threat, particularly to Mossad. And if you follow Q, you know that they're saving Israel for last. The people of Israel aren't bad, but Mossad is bad. Just like there are good people in our intelligence community here in the United States, and there was also bad people. There were bad people in the CIA. There were cabal people that have infiltrated every area of our government. So I believe the most powerful spy agency in the world is Mossad, and people like myself are a huge threat to Mossad, because what is Mossad potentially funding? They're funding a lot of this child sex trafficking. They're funding people like Jeffrey Epstein. And they have a lot of ties to big name people in Hollywood, politicians, government officials, I believe members of the royal family, you name it. Harvey Weinstein. Who did Harvey Weinstein use to harass and target his rape victims? He used Mossad agents. So now in my personal life, it's all starting to make sense why I have dealt with so many bad attacks from people who are working for Mossad. It's just been wild, and everything is just, all the pieces are starting to come together for me in terms of, you know, why my life has been so crazy and how big this really is, how big the Q movement really is, and how big of a threat Q is to these world governments. And, you know, I'm the only person from the mainstream media that has come out and been a pro-Q reporter and a pro-Pizzagate reporter. When I say pro-Pizzagate reporter, I'm the only one from the mainstream media that actually has come out and said that Pizzagate is real, who is not funded by dark money, who is not controlled opposition. So I want to make that clear. Okay. So Jeffrey Epstein, despite all the lawsuits against him and the criminal charges against him before his new arrest, his recent arrest, he still was able to move freely in these Hollywood circles. He was still able to go to many Hollywood parties. Hollywood and the elites still embraced him. He had private dinners at his home with people like Katie Couric and Chelsea Handler, who's been very silent about his arrest. You know, like I said in my last video, she's She needed counseling when President Trump became president because she was so traumatized by it. Meanwhile, she's hanging out with a serial pedophile and child sex trafficker. Maybe that's the real reason, Chelsea Handler, that you need counseling. I don't know. So a lot of other creepy things are coming out about Jeffrey Epstein and his pals and the women that he used as madams to procure other women and children to become sex slaves for him and his elite circle of friends. So one thing of note is the island had submarine access, all right? So the island had submarine access, and apparently Ghislaine Maxwell, who was at the Clintons' wedding, good friend of the Clintons too, of course, apparently she had a submarine license. So let's think about this. Why would the island need submarine access? Why would they need a submarine? This is speculation on my part, but my guess is that's how they transported many of the children into the island, okay? So people are also talking about the more darker aspects of what Jeffrey Epstein was actually up to. And I started to tap into this a little bit in my last video, but I'm going to get a little bit more into it now. He wasn't just trafficking kids. This man is a full-blown pedophile Satanist. And they do way worse things to children than sexually abuse them. They hurt them, they torture them, and they sacrifice them. This is their religion. They worship Baal. They worship Moloch. And they believe that they get power. They get power from hurting children and sacrificing children. These people are not normal. They are not like you and I. So when you sit here and you listen to this video and you find this just so unbelievable and so hard to believe, and you think in your head, how could anyone do that? I would never do that. They are not like you and I. These people are demons. They are not human. They are soulless. They're sociopathic. They are not like you and I. So when you try to understand the evil we're dealing with, you can't compare them to yourself, and you can't compare them to any normal person you know, because you'll never be able to understand it. These are evil people, and they're not like you and I, and things that make you and I happy and give us joy. I enjoy going for a hike. I enjoy being out on the ocean. I enjoy animals. I enjoy playing with children. Those things don't give these people joy. What gives them joy is hurting others, is torturing other people. They truly get joy out of seeing other people, including children, and yes, babies too. They truly get joy out of seeing children get hurt. That's who these people are. So, all right, the submarine access, that's notable. I believe that was most likely used to traffic children. There are many ways that children are trafficked. They are trafficked, I believe, in submarines. They're often trafficked in private jets so they can go more unnoticed, but they are also trafficked on commercial flights. They are also trafficked in shipping containers in the most horrific conditions. They will pack children in naked like sardines in a shipping container, throw them on a boat, no food, no water, nothing. When these children arrive at a port, a huge chunk of them are dead. There's feces and urine and throw up all over them when they arrive. A lot of these children are trafficked at the ports, which is why Q talks a lot about these ports, particularly the Long Beach harbor. And they're also trafficked through the border. And I talk about this all the time, but that's why there was such a big fight with the border. That is why the Democrats do not want a wall. And that's why the Democrats encourage illegals to come across. Most illegals that come across with children are not their family members, they're human traffickers. They are trafficking these children to be sex trafficked, and a lot of these kids end up getting killed. Their organs are harvested. They're used for adrenochrome, all kinds of horrible things, all right? So let's go back to Jeffrey Epstein. there are articles in the mainstream media now talking about all the strange things that are popping up at Jeffrey Epstein's apartment. He had a dental chair, lots of dental equipment. What else did he have? Hold on, I'll make sure I got this right. He ordered a paper shredder and a tile extractor to his home. Now, we can speculate what he used the paper shredder for. And let me rewind you for a second. This isn't your average paper shredder. He shipped himself a 53-pound paper shredder. Again, these people like to torture children, and he also had a cutting room in his house. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they were using these devices to hurt children. I've read that some of these traffickers and pedophiles, they rip out children's teeth, so when they're molesting them and hurting them, if they bite them, there's no bite marks left on their bodies. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least if these devices were used to dismember bodies. Seriously, nothing would surprise me at this point. We know that they torture children, and we know that they sacrifice children, so none of the stuff would surprise me. You guys can Google all this. Again, a lot of this stuff is going mainstream, which is wild because I've known a lot of these things for a very long time, but now the mainstream media is being forced to look into this, and so the mainstream media is actually running articles about all these creepy things that have been found on his island and at his home, and so it just goes on and on and on. So what else was found? A mysterious safe was found. I don't know if it was found on his home or in the island. I think it was in the islands. Again, there are a lot of reports out there, a lot of people that have gone on the record saying that he was working for the deep state, Mossad and or CIA, and that his island was used as a brownstone operation. And I've talked about this before. So his island was used not just to rape, torture, and traffic kids, but I believe that, and from what I've read and researched, that people that weren't blackmailed, people that aren't pedophiles, and people that aren't bad people were brought to that island, unassuming people who thought they were just gonna go for a vacation and hang out and have a good time. A lot of these people, I believe, were brought to this island and drugged and put in compromising positions with children, videotaped, photographed to make it look like they were hurting children, to make it look like they were sexually abusing children. These operations are more common than you would think. The deep state, the CIA, Mossad, they have run operations like this for years, and they're very common. So a lot of people in positions of power who may not even be bad people have been blackmailed. And because they've been blackmailed, they have to do what the cabal and what their handlers tell them to do. And if they don't, they're threatened with prosecution. They're threatened with these tapes to go public. Their families are threatened. It's a mess, all right? And there's a lot of speculation that the Playboy Mansion was also run as a CIA operation. Joam has talked about this recently. And Q is now starting to hone in on Bill Maher. There's speculation that Bill Maher is Hugh Hefner's dad. Wouldn't surprise me. He looks just like him. And, we know Bill Maher has gone to the island. That's come out. And Bill Maher's a creepy dude. A lot of people are calling him out as a pedophile. He's gone around town wearing his red shoes. And again, this story came out and he's said probably thousands and thousands of jokes about President Trump, but now Jeffrey Epstein gets arrested. It's the biggest story of the year, and he has nothing to say about it. The silence is just deafening. Isn't it funny to you guys how, the Me Too movement, everyone came out and, they were talking about someone touching them inappropriately, and Hollywood was just all about Me Too and Time's Up and blah, 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 blah. And then it comes out that Jeffrey Epstein, who's friends with all these elites, who's this huge, high-profile billionaire, is rape, torturing, and trafficking children, and they're all silent. They have nothing to say about it. And I've been talking for a really long time as well how the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement was nothing but a deep state operation. I believe it was funded by the CIA to distract from the real horrors that are going on in Hollywood, and that would be the rape, torture, and trafficking of kids. And there's proof of this because who did the cabal prop up to be the faces of Me Too? Rose McGowan, who comes from a cabal family. Her family was in a cult. And Asia Argento. And what did we learn recently about Asia Argento? She's a pedophile. She raped a kid. She raped a kid. And he sued her. And she paid him off. If you're innocent, you don't pay people off. So think about that. The Me Too movement, the faces of the Me Too movement was a member of the cabal and a woman who's a pedophile. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. I knew from the beginning that the Me Too movement was just a farce. It was a joke. It was a distraction. And sure enough, I was proven to be right when we found out the truth about Asia and who funded it. And CIA funded a lot of, at least the Time's Up movement. I believe that the Me Too movement as well. And CIA, which is the biggest talent agency in the country, I believe, is closely aligned with our CIA deep state cabal. So round and round we go. All right. So now people are starting to talk about the temple on Jeffrey Epstein's island. And the mainstream media is starting to talk about that. So again, my last video, I kind of scratched the surface talking about the child sex trafficking. But what people need to understand is that it gets way more horrific and way more darker than simply trafficking kids, which obviously is horrible and horrific. But the rabbit hole is very deep and it gets much darker than that. So again, these people are Satanists. They worship Moloch, they worship Baal, and they believe that they get power from doing these horrible things to children. And the temple was built to be a place, I believe, where they could do their rituals. These people are into their creepy rituals. The movie Eyes Wide Shut, I believe, was a documentary. And I believe that movie just scratched the surface as to what goes on behind the scenes in these secret societies and at these secret parties. The movie actually just kind of scratched the surface. They didn't really, I don't think they showed anyone raping or torturing children or child sacrifice, but there actually was a scene that was cut out, and there are people that believe that might have been what was in that scene. And the director, Stanley Kubrick, was killed before the movie came out, and a lot of people believe he was killed for making this movie, which exposed the cabal and what they do behind the scenes at these parties and in their rituals. All right, and we're starting to see some other names coming out tied to the island. Stephen Hawking was there. You guys, there are so many names that would shock you that are involved in the pedophilia and the child sex trafficking who are Satanists. It's just horrifying. There's one more thing I want to talk about. R. Kelly. It's not a coincidence that all these people, all these celebrities are getting arrested now for child sex trafficking. I said this in my last video, I'll say it again. President Trump has made breaking up elite pedophile rings a priority in his administration. I knew that before he got elected. I knew that he knew about the child sex trafficking, and I knew he knew about the elite pedophile rings, and that is why I worked so hard to get the truth out about him and the truth out about demon Hillary Clinton. Because I knew that none of these arrests would be happening if Hillary won. And if she had won, we would not be seeing any of these people go down, because we had people in positions of power for decades that were protecting people like Jeffrey Epstein, protecting people like R. Kelly, protecting people like Keith Raniere and Allison Mack. It's over. Their time's over. All these people are going down. So now we have R. Kelly arrested on sex trafficking. I find it really interesting because he lives in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. I used to cover him actually in Chicago. And it's interesting because I'd gone to a few of his concerts, and there was nights when I was out and at a nightclub or a party and he'd be there. And it's interesting though, because some people in his circle told me to stay away from his house, and they told me not to go to his parties. And I always wondered why. I always was thinking, why won't they invite me to his parties? And now I realize they were trying to protect me. I think they might have known what was going on. I had no idea. But I think they were trying to protect me from him. So thanks guys for that. But yes, so just to reiterate, all these arrests are happening now because President Trump is president, and I can't stress that enough. We have seen so many elite pedophile rings being broken up since President Trump has become president. I've been tracking them since day one. We've seen so many elite pedophile rings go down, so many elite pedophiles go down, and we're not just seeing them here in the United States. I've noticed a pattern with President Trump. We will often hear about him calling a foreign leader or meeting with a foreign leader, and then literally within the next 3 days, there'll be a massive elite pedophile ring bust and or a sex trafficking ring bust that connects the United States in that country. So what is happening is President Trump is not just taking down child sex trafficking rings here in the United States. He's literally taking down global child sex trafficking rings. From the fall of the House of Saud to rings that have been broken up in the Philippines, Thailand, Germany. There's so many. I can't keep track of them. I think there's been some in Canada, connections to Mexico. President Trump is single-handedly breaking up elite pedophile rings all over the world. And so, for the people in your lives that still think that President Trump is a bad guy, explain these things to him. If you don't like the way President Trump talks, if you think that his tweets are inappropriate, great. But if you can't get behind his fight to save children from child sex trafficking rings and horrific pedophiles who are not only are raping these kids but torturing them, then there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. There's no reason why everyone should not be able to get behind President Trump on this cause. All right, that's all I have for today. I didn't have that much time, but I wanted to do another video. I'm trying to get back in the swing of things, and that's it. That's it for tonight. So if you guys want to add any more information in the comments, please do. There's so much coming out. If there's anything else you want me specifically to talk about, I try my best to read all the comments. Just let me know in the comments, all right? All right, guys, have a good night.